you so much to everyone for joining this evening. My name's Ellie Greeny. I'm the Managing Director at Transition Partners. If you're not familiar with Transition Partners, we are based in Leeds, head office is Leeds, and we specialise in tech, business change, transformation, digital recruitment, UK-wide, and actually we cover off a lot of Europe now. So yeah, interesting year for us all. I think everyone will agree. So looking forward to discussing that this evening. We regularly host events across tech and transformation. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date with the upcoming webinar series that we've got going on. We do record the evening for our YouTube channel, as we just mentioned. So feel free to, if you didn't want your names included in any of the Q&A section, then feel free to just take that out. You can edit that on the Zoom. So this evening is all about taking a retrospective look at the impact 2020 had on the tech scene and how it's shaped the future for 2021. So tonight we'd like everyone to try and get involved with comments on how you found the year, and also if you can send in any questions for the future and what that might look like, that'd be fantastic. So I've got a superb panel of speakers tonight. I'm going to go around and sort of introduce them all individually, and they can tell us a little bit about the scope and remit of. Hi, Tim.
Hi, sorry, you broke up a little bit there, Ellie.
Oh,
but,
did I?
Yeah,
Can you hear me okay now? Is that all right?
Yeah, it's fine. Hi. Hi, I'm Tim Lewis. I am a software engineering manager at DAZN in Leeds. We are a company that do over-the-top sports video streaming, essentially. A little bit of background about me. I kind of come through a development background, always been interested in computers. I think I had my first computer about 8 or 9, ZX Spectrum, learned to program that. Been programming most of my life, though I don't get to do so much these days. Try and keep my hand in every now and again. But yeah, at DAZN in Leeds, we kind of working on sort of operational tools and systems for DAZN, the global business. So it's an interesting place to be, good fun.
Well, great to have you here this evening. Thanks for getting involved, Tim. Mike Stoodley, who is the Principal Consultant at Hippo Digital. Hi, Mike.
Hi, you nicked my intro. Hi, I'm Mike Stoodley. I'm the Hippo Digital. So what we're about primarily is UCD. So it's a user-centered design approach to actually developing solutions. So rather than kind of going software first, what's the solution? We take a much more kind of user research based approach into developing those solutions. I've been there for a year now. Previous to that, I've been development manager at a place called Mannheim, or Cox Automotive is known. And I've kind of worked as a developer, much like Tim, for that height. Also programming on a ZX Spectrum, like all good people should, which obviously shows all our ages as well, which is unfortunate, but there you go.
Well, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us, Mike. And then we've got the infamous Leslie Baker, who is the development manager at the Insurance Emporium. Hello.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to say what they said. I mean, it pretty much covers everything about me.
I'm
Les Baker. I'm a development manager I'm the development manager at the Insurance Emporium. We primarily sell insurance, as you'd expect from the name. We do pet insurance. We do all sorts of different insurance types. Me myself, I've worked in the tech stack for many years. Like these guys, I started off when I was about 8 years old. Amstrad 464 guys with the coloured keys, not a good old ZX Spectrum. We couldn't afford one of those things. No, we had a 464. But a tape deck that you can still remember the sound that it made when it wound up, and when it wound the game up, it was always the same sound. Don't ask me to do it, I can. I've managed teams large and small, and I'm currently the manager there. So that's basically me.
Awesome, fantastic. And it'd be interesting to speak to you this evening, I guess, as well, because you've changed roles in the past year as well. So it'd be interesting to find out more about that. So let's start then by talking about the biggest challenges that you've found for 2020 and what sort of steps that you've made to overcome that. I mean, for me personally, I guess as a leader within a business, the challenge has been around like supporting my team and making sure that they're all happy and looking after everyone. It's been really tough, hasn't it? And I think communication's been key to that, but there's certainly been a lot of challenges along the way. So it'd be great, I guess, if individually you talk about the challenges that you found and steps that we've done to move forward from that. So I don't know who wants to start.
I'll go first. I don't want to.
Lovely, thanks, Tim.
I think we kind of, you already touched on what I think was the biggest challenge from that kind of, okay, we're now remote working all the time. It's communication, just bottom line communication. How do you convert from being in an office full of people where you can just turn around and, you know, shout at someone or get their attention, or have a, you know, you meet them in the kitchen, have a coffee, have a chat, picking up one of those things. When you all go remote, that all goes away. And actually keeping that sort of line of comms open is difficult, actually. Yes, we have Teams, we have, you know, a sort of a not for business subject, you know, kind of Slack channels. Some of the teams use Discord to do their voice comms, and, you know, we're quite open inside, like, you know, official business comms goes through Teams. Everything else, whatever works for you, you know, you work out as a team. That's great, and that works. But I think more and more as the year went on, as 2020 went on, and sort of kind of still going into this year, is this sort of pressure that builds when you get lots of IMs, especially on anything. There is a kind of tendency to, I think, for people to go, oh, as an IM, I must answer it. It's, oh, hang on, I'll just, and that break of flow and that constant context switching between, like, I'm doing some work, I'm answering a question, I'm doing some work, is really, really, I mean, I'll use the word destructive. That sounds probably a little bit emotive and maybe a little over the top, but it really can impact someone's day-to-day working. And it's not so much the disruption it can cause, because quite often they're work questions and you can say, okay, well, I'll answer this, relevant to what I'm doing right now. I think it's kind of the cognitive mental load that constant nagging electronically has on people. So one of the things we're going to start looking at doing more, I hope, in DAZN, especially DAZN leads, is kind of trying to start embracing what's got known as asynchronous comms. So more and more sort of like, do you need an answer to this straight away? Yes or no? If the answer to that is no, and quite often it probably is no, I don't need to know instantly, then maybe I should be asking this via email, where someone can go, I'll answer that in an hour when I finish this thing, you know, or I'll look at my emails at lunch or whatever. And it's a two-way thing, you know. We as a sort of business need to sort of accept that we shouldn't expect instant answers to everything. We should be able to go, I'm happy to know this some point this week. Here's an email. And if I really want to know something straight away, then I can go to an instant message and go, okay, here's a, I need to know, please, can you tell me? And I kind of say that, and I'm saying this in the public forum for a bit of self-accountability as well, because I know I am dreadful at just going, oh, I'll just ask a question on Slack or on Teams or whatever, and then people instantly reply, and I think, oh, damn, I've done it again. So I think that probably one of the biggest challenges we faced was that comms issue, in like, how do you keep that comms going, but do it in a way that isn't difficult for people's mental load, which in the first couple of months it's fine, right? You kind of get used to it, but when you're in constant Zoom meetings, constant Teams meetings, it's just all the time. It's like people need space to just think and just get into their own headspace and do their thing. And I think that's something that we still are kind of trying to figure out and get right. I don't think we've got it right yet. I think we're now sort of seeing what the impact has been, and we're trying to put into place, you know, kind of guidelines and procedures to help this sort of thing. You know, we've always said, if you need to go and, you know, do your homeschooling, do it. If you need to go and pick up your kids from somewhere, go do it, you know, and everyone should expect that we're doing something different. If you need an hour to go and do the dishwasher and the washing or whatever, fine, just let your teammates know and do that. So we've always tried to be open and flexible in those terms, but I still think we're kind of guilty of just firing at IMs at each other constantly. And actually, that's not necessarily a great thing. And I think that's something that, if I had to put one thing on from learning, you know, as a learning to take forward, especially in a more sort of remote working world that we seem to be heading towards, I think it would be that.
You think that works though, Tim, as sending out emails? Like, so if I've got 10 people that I'm going to email, so I'm going to email my dev team. And what I do is I include them all in the email because that's the obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
And then one of them decides to actually respond after half an hour and goes, Jim will know about that. And is that actually worse? Because now you've got this horrendous email chain going on. Is that actually better than Slack or Teams, or worse than Slack or Teams, do you think?
So I was going to say the same actually following from that, which is that there's a danger with email, that you get emailed out. You get so many emails in your box. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you know, I've found for years, email is one of those things. People I'll send an email, they'll get me a response back. And different places, different people have different expectations of when that email has got to be responded to. Some people expect it to be immediate. Some people expect it to be like it's when you get around to it, send me an email. Often same with Teams or Zoom or whatever the channel is there, it's setting the expectations is I often find is more important than actually setting the message through on this different channel, because the one place or one use channel, they'll use one channel more than another. Some might use Zoom, some might use Teams, some might use email. And of course, there are differences in the platforms. You've got Zoom doesn't have the same features and functionality as Teams. It's a different product, as you'd expect. Teams, you've got channels, you've got private groups, you've got the urgent, important, normal priority for a message that you can send as well. Urgent, that buzzes the living out of you for every 5 minutes and annoys you.
Is there another level?
I'm wondering if there's like a super urgent level that kind of prods you from some kind of connection to the PC or someone that says, you've got to reply to this now. But it's basically saying it's about setting with your team what the importance is of each channel, setting the boundaries, which is you're right, it's communication, but I'm just thinking that it's more about the communication you set rather than the communication you receive, setting the expectations for what the response is. So for example, whenever I'm working with teams that are using Teams as a platform, I'll say to them, use urgent, use important, use normal. If it is urgent, mark it as urgent. If it's a message I need to respond to now. Otherwise, it's get back to me when you feel like it. As a Teams message, it's kind of almost like a for information kind of thing. If you need me urgently, pick up the phone and call me. I'd rather you speak to me, because it's like walking around a desk. It's that setting the expectations, I think, is more than actually setting the technology. If you don't set the expectations for what your expectations are, as it were, for the technology, how can you expect them to conform to that and to contact you through the right medium for what's right for you and the business?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, actually. Yeah. I guess my reason for sort of suggesting email is we tend to live on Teams, Slack as a business,
right?
And emails tend to be that more sort of asynchronous kind of communication that goes on. I get your point, though. Actually, you can lose stuff in a massive deluge of email. And I think that setting expectations is the thing. And I quite often will say, even if I send an IM, I'll say, I don't need the answer straight away, but what about this thing? But I still think doing that, that constant pinging.
Yeah.
I think it's about reflecting people where they are in the business, though. So another classic that we do is I'm going to mute every message that comes in through Slack unless you mention my name. So if I get an then I'll respond and I'll look at it. But if it's not, well, it's obviously not that urgent for me to look at. It's just little things like that that kind of help a bit. And you've got like external channels which obviously get monitored a bit more closely. I was going to mention Zoom, though, because Zoom is one of those horrendous things and a brilliant thing that everybody gets what we call Zoom fatigue. And it is awful. And it's a really horrible thing to go, I have another meeting following this meeting, following the next meeting.
Yep.
And one day I remember I had 5 hours of 1 hour meetings, literally with no break in between them. And it's horrendous because actually your concentration level drops. You're not ready for the meeting because you're still running off the back of that meeting. So it takes 15 minutes to get ready for the meeting. Other people are talking. I think if you were in an office, you wouldn't get that. Or you might, but it's less likely. You might go, do you know what? I'm taking a coffee break, and you totally zone out from stuff for a bit. Whereas I think we feel almost compelled to attend meetings. I get an invite I don't really know what it's about, so I feel like I should attend. One of my previous bosses actually used to go, if I'm in a meeting and I think that I'm not adding any value, I'm just going to leave. And I think actually there's almost this kind of thing with Zoom. People are going to notice if I go or do something else, and therefore I can't do something else. It's kind of the Zoom etiquette, isn't it? You shall always turn your camera on, you shall always do, etc. Yeah. I think that we sometimes have to be a bit more brave and open about actually who's this meeting for, and is it relevant for the people that I've invited? And 9 times out of 10, you've probably invited too many people.
That's a good point. I mean, I'm sure you've done the same as me in the past. Where you say you're in a meeting, is this thing relevant to me? Do you guys mind actually if I back out? I don't think I'm adding value. Do you need me for this? Or call me back in if you need me. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't think I'm adding value here. I think I'm just in the way. Do you mind if I back out, leave you alone, and call me in if you need me? And the people are, they're quite honest. They'll say to you, well, actually, we need you because we're going to be discussing this topic in a minute. And you take 2 seconds. Okay, well, just dial me back in, or I will stay in if you need me to. But do you mind if I just mute myself and do some work in the meanwhile? It's in some ways it promotes more of the comms, because you have to communicate more because you are at this distance, you are through this screen. But the Zoom fatigue thing is very, very real. I mean, anyone that says they haven't in a management position had Zoom fatigue, I think is lying, because it's just inevitable. You do get, and I've heard friends of mine say to me things like, I can't talk to you tonight. I've had 4 meetings in a row. I can't go on for the family Zoom session between 2 different families because I am too knackered. I've been looking at a screen all day. And you do get that fatigue. Part of it, I remember someone years ago saying to me, was that if you're staring at a monitor, you're looking at a screen, doesn't matter where you're looking at, you could be looking around different corners or quadrants, eventually you stop blinking. And you have to look away into the distance to make your eyes realize actually your eyes are dry, now need to blink again, so your eyes don't dry up. So there is an element of that fatigue that's psychological, but also an element that it's physical. Your eyes do dry up and you get.
I think actually when you're talking about that, interestingly, Ian Holloway was speaking to me this week, and he was saying about that part of this Zoom fatigue I was complaining about, and he was saying about how that when your team and when part of the reason that people are feeling the way they're feeling this year, so much time on Zoom, when you're on Zoom with people, you spend the average is like 70% of the time you end up looking at yourself, and you end up coming away feeling like insecure about yourself and demotivated and things like that. And it's really weird, but then since I've been on, I've started thinking about it, and it's like really, like, I guess, shined a light upon that. But I think definitely, Tim, within like 2 minutes of you speaking then, it made me think, oh my God, I need to stop all this IMing everyone all the time, because I 100% agree. Half the time I'm distracting my team from the job that I'm asking them to do. So yeah, 100%, I'm definitely going to work on that. But it'll be interesting then, Mike, what sort of challenges, what are the biggest challenges that you found the past year?
So I think for me personally, it's presenting. So when you're doing client presentations or kind of demonstrations, something like that.
Yeah.
Especially if you go into client sites or things like that, you see the client and you interact with the client. And now we have this wonderful thing called Zoom, but we're really not used to actually presenting on Zoom, and it's quite alien, and we don't tend to use hand motions and things like that, or engage with the camera. So a classic one is been on this presentation course, a brilliant thing is that you should look at the camera rather than look at the person. And the worst thing that I've had recently is I've done some interviews where people were literally looking like this.
Yes.
And it's like, and they're talking to me, and it's like, you're not talking to me. You're talking to the monitor, which has my face on. And it's people don't realize how distracting it actually is, how I would say rude it is from a customer's experience, because they think that you're doing something else where actually you're just looking in this other direction. And I've literally, obviously shouldn't admit to this, but kind of written off people from an interview when they go. I'm looking up here at my screen because my monitor's up there. It's like, my goodness me, you don't know how to interact.
Edit that out, Ellie.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
Well, I think like that engagement piece is so hard to do remote, isn't it?
It is, and it's that kind of thing where it just does not help their case, and they have to shine through on so many other things because you go, especially in a client-facing business, which we are. It's like you are going to be presented to clients. You are going to give your demonstrations to clients virtually every day, and therefore, if you naturally are looking off into the distance, you are not going to be engaging with the clients. And when you're in a room, it's totally different because you don't suddenly go, I'm going to look in a totally different direction to the people I'm speaking to. You just don't do it. But we need to train ourselves to doing that. And silly things like I've raised my laptop on a book and put a light above myself to make it more, to make the light better, and things like that. You just don't think about until somebody goes, it's a bit dark there, isn't it? And, oh, lovely background of trees. What's actually behind you? Lovely picture of Tigger. That is behind you.
I think it's interesting because you say from a consultancy perspective, and I get that when you're in a consultancy, people are your product, aren't they, ultimately? But also, I guess from a management and leadership perspective, like you need to think of the impact. If you've got 20 minutes a day to speak to your team and you're not focusing 100% on your team, how's the impact of that going to make them feel? So I think that's a really valid point. What about yourself, Les? What challenges have you had?
Ooh, well, other than the personal challenges, I think the difference really is, it's like you say, it's about engaging with people.
Yeah.
So I very quickly had to get used to doing things like Zooming, Teamsing for interviews. For me, it was a bit easier because the teams I've run over the past few years, I tend to encourage people going from teams anyway. I think the classic line is if one person is in the meeting, not in the meeting on site, but on Zoom or Teams or whatever, the entire meeting is on Teams. Because if one person is outside the room, they will be the poor citizen. They will not be able to take part in the same way as everybody else in that room because there will be delays. People won't be able to hear them on the speakerphone. So the general rule is if one person isn't around, they're on Teams, then everybody is on Teams because it means everybody's on a level playing field. That makes it a bit easier when we've moved into this kind of situation because we're used to it. And to a large degree, I think developers are more used to this because they've been used to doing this more from where they've been working from home in the past. I think the main difference, I think, is more moving forward in terms of how business and commerce is going to change. So you talked about how you do demos, people do demos to customers on Zoom at the moment. One of the things got mentioned to me from a friend of mine's a sales manager. He said, well, in the future, I'm not going to have to go to sites all the time. So, well, when it opens up, you're not going to go see clients. But I can pick and choose who I will go see. So, well, give me an example. And the example he gave was quite a simple one. He said, look, there was a time where I had to travel to China. I traveled to China and I saw 20, 30 different people, had a quick chat, 15, 20 minutes of each of them. And then I moved on. And then I invited, stayed there for about a week and I had about 4 or 5 days of this. And then I went to see one of them again to have the final meeting. He said, I'd now do all of that on Zoom or Teams or whatever. And then I'd pick one day to travel over to China to go see them in person. He said, I wouldn't spend the whole week over there. So in many ways, it's kind of shifted us a little bit to say, well, okay, I'm going to do more via the technology that's there because I can, and it's acceptable and there's ways to work with it. But equally, like you say, Mike, is that there is a Zoom etiquette. There is a Teams etiquette. There's manners that you have to do whilst you're on a Teams call. So like you say, you don't look over here, you look at the screen. There was a lovely podcast I saw where the guy was talking about how to build with a reflective two-way mirror a box that sits at an angle pointed at your laptop screen. And the idea is that you have your camera on the top from your laptop and it reflects down so that you look into the camera, but you're actually looking at the middle of the screen. So that way you can look into the camera. And of course, there's a lot of other things like, Zoom etiquette, like you say, things like you don't stand like this up at the camera. Who wants to see up my nostrils while I'm on the screen camera? Don't do it on a phone or put it sideways so you can look at someone full screen. Have, head to waistline. I mean, I got asked I was interviewing before my current role for the first lockdown. And I got asked twice, are you wearing trousers? which you end up standing there and going, yes, I am.
I passed that bit.
It's honestly a question. Are you properly attired for this interview that you're taking here? And it's these are sort of things that people they want to know. Are you taking the effort, even though you're on this Zoom call? Thank you for taking the Zoom call, yada yada. But are you taking the effort that you would if you were in person? So it changes that. The technology enables us to do more, enables us to reach more people.
Yeah.
Certainly, working. One of the big things I think changing in the future is going to be a lot more working from home. Developers have proved we can work from home and be as effective, if not more effective.
Yeah.
The example I gave to someone I've given previously as well is the time you save, the time that you're not spending. So if you think about when we used to go to the office, what do? You get up in the morning, you get changed, you get washed, do all your stuff, and you psych yourself ready to get in the car. You get in the car, you drive, you get to the office. You've now wasted half an hour, whatever it is, to get to the office. And what happens when you get there? You stop and you psych yourself up again, ready to start work. So you can make coffee, you go talk to your colleagues, you get prepped for the day. You're doing your email just to psych yourself back into the mode. So you lose about half an hour there anyway. And then when you're on the way back home, you're doing exactly the same thing again. Whereas now you get up, get changed, do all your stuff. I'm now in the office, I'm ready to go. I'm psyched up, I'm here, I'm done. So productivity goes up.
Yeah. Although from a personal perspective, like decompressing at the end of the day is a lot harder, isn't it? And I think that's obviously a challenge that everyone's faced. I think it'd be interesting then to chat to you guys about like training and developing your team. Obviously that's a really important role for all of you. Like how has that training changed for you over the past year, and what are the plans for you and your teams in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I'll lead on this one. Training people is hard. And training new people is really hard. And training people with no experience is really, 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 really hard. I think there is, I was looking at happened to watch the news at lunchtime, and they're saying that unemployment from the youth is on the rise. It's sitting about 15%. And I think one of the reasons is because it is so hard to bring people who are totally new with very, very little experience into an organization.
It's so tough, and actually that's one of the biggest challenges that we have is there is a concern, and I've actually been doing a bit of work on with Manchester Codes around it. It's like there's a concern that we are not going to be able to support the next generation of people who need that support, that one-on-one support, and doing that remotely. So it'd be really interesting actually to hear this. Yeah,
so I think I don't know if people have heard of North Coders before. Justin's on here, he's been to North Coders, and it's like, I think people who start off with even a university degree, it's kind of considered, that's great, you've got the theory, now welcome to real life, where nothing is like it was that you got taught at university, because you don't start off on a new project every week with the lovely freshness that is nothing. You're often starting off with this monolithic beast that you have to break down. So people go, oh, but I could design that from scratch. And it's like, no, because now you need to consider everything else that's hanging off the side. So to train somebody to look at that kind of big picture is, in quote, the old days, 2 years ago, you used to literally sit down with them, go, right, here's it. If you've got any questions, come and sit next to me. We'll go through this. I'll take you through that. I'll take 5 minutes of my time. I know it's only going to be 5 minutes, and then I can sit down, and then 2 minutes later you can come. Now it's like, oh, I've got a Slack message again. And then 2 minutes, I've got another Slack message. And for some reason, on Slack or Zoom, everything seems to take that much longer and takes that bit more effort. I think with more experienced people who've got that kind of 3 to 5 years experience, bringing them into a business is not as hard as it seems, to be honest. I mean, me and Les have both moved jobs during this current pandemic, but because giving our age away. We're a bit older.
Speak for yourself, mate.
It does seem easier to kind of put yourself in a new business because you know roughly how the world works. You know what you're getting yourself into. You know the scope of stuff that you're looking at. You know the kind of different people that you're going to be working with. There's just a kind of thing of, okay, it's going to take me a bit to learn, but I can still do it for myself. I know where to look for the resources. For somebody who's new, they don't know necessarily where to look for those resources. Online training, it can be good. Zoom training, we've done with like 12, 15 people, and it's great if run properly. And I think there's a very big difference between someone giving a good presentation course and going, and here's my PowerPoint slide that we're going to run through. We can't do the group activities that I used to do. So we're just going to run through PowerPoint for 4 hours. And it's like, oh, my goodness me, I'm dead after
PowerPoint.
minutes.
Yeah.
And that kind of relates actually to the presentations that we're doing kind of on Zoom, is that you can't have them running for a long time. Anyway, back to my point. I think you can do online training. It's okay. Self-training, so using things like Pluralsight or Kogura or something like that, that works for some people. But you've kind of got to have that base and a lot of time. So when somebody says, oh, it's about a 4-hour course, no, it's about an 8-hour course, because by the time you've done the dev, the setup, etc., it's going to take you that much longer. I think the way in for people who are new starters is through things like North Coders, where you've got very experienced trainers giving people really intensive course. And then businesses like ours can go in and go, right, these people have got level X of experience. And it's not from anyone, it's for people who know business and know what they're doing. And they come in with that level of development experience and know-how. So at least I've got something to build on. So I'm not starting from nothing. Also depends on size of business. Obviously, some large businesses have got full-time trainers who can do that. Yeah. But I think you're going to find more of those specialist kind of trainers doing online training and group training.
Yeah.
So we had sorry, go on.
Sorry, Lady. I was going to say, just to sort of reiterate that point, it's very difficult to onboard someone and get them trained up. We rely a lot on pair programming. So, you know, with new starters, we try and encourage people to pair. You know, you take a ticket together, work on it together, do that, and that you can use that vehicle to start saying, okay, as someone gets to know people, gets to know the team, gets a bit more confidence, they can start to drive and go that. But yeah, we don't take on people completely green out of uni, but we have taken North Coders on, and it's fantastic. Frankly, they are putting people through a boot camp, and they're coming out with the skills which we sort of looked down the list, went, well, this is like we couldn't have set it up better ourselves. So you know, and I think more and more that's a way to get into tech and into coding, if that's what you want to do, is do one of these boot camps. In many ways, and I think I agree with Mike here, I think it prepares you more for the real world than a university degree will.
I think I definitely agree with that, but even the people that are coming out of boot camps are really struggling. Like, I'm actually helping a few people at the moment that are looking, they've finished the boot camps and now they're ready for first role. But it's just one of those things, isn't it, that people aren't hiring at that level at the moment, because we're kind of putting that a little bit on hold, hoping that things would move quick and we wouldn't be 12 months down the line like we are. But they will naturally, that is going to cause an impact in the market in a couple of years' time when we're looking for that mid-level developer, and everyone's like, well, where are they? Well, we didn't
perhaps
really
a bit of fear.
That junior level.
It's perhaps a bit of fear, because the fact is that we're so used to training people up from being sat next to them. Like Mike says, what do you used to do? You sit around with you and say, okay, work with this person together. Or you bring in people 2 at a time. Why 2 at a time? Because they bounce off of each other and work together to get the job done. And that's how they both learn and grow. To then, you know, they ask the questions of each other before they ask a senior developer to then help themselves grow. There is a bit of a difference there. Now, yes, there are tools that can help with that. You've got Visual Studio has got some new features in that allow for people to edit on the same screen and share the same code without having to have a remote desktop session going, that kind of thing. So that the technology is there. It's just not been prevalent, not been well publicized and well known to be able to know you can do that. If you come back to how we train though on a Zoom session as opposed to doing it in person, something that's worth noting, there was early on in the pandemic, I got asked if I'd talk to some teachers about how they teach in school, some of the problems they had for Zoom sessions. And what I realized was that the kids are like an extreme version of the adults. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Kids, they've got no off button, they've got no off switch. Miss, I hate this. They've got no off switch. They're gonna say it as it is. Now, some of these kids were fantastically well behaved with certain teachers. Some of them were completely the opposite, and it's like devil's spawn of Satan, in the lessons. But the teachers were fantastic in a classroom. Just when it came to doing it on Zoom, are the skills the same? And the answer is no, they're not. When you're on a Zoom call, when you're training on a Zoom session, it's a different set of rules. You're in this contained little box. Oh, I've matched that well. I could quite my box. But it's there, yeah. There you go. Can do Vogue in a minute. But you've got this contained little box that you can train within, and that is your window to see them. It's like tunnel vision onto the trainer. It's a different way of teaching. It's a different way of engaging with your class. You can't walk around different parts of the room because they can't follow your eyes. So it's a different way of teaching. It's a different way of interacting with the kids. You have to do different styles of teaching to be able to engage with them in the same way. You have to give them, potentially more homework. There's different ways to engage them. And to do that with adults, that then translates back that some people are going to be better at training in person. Some are going to be better in training on a Zooms or a team session. And you don't necessarily, the worst thing is you don't necessarily know until they do it. But that's like any training really. And if you think about that, even before pandemic, you didn't know when you went to the training course at the center whether the trainer was going to be any good. You don't know it even now when you're on a Zoom session now. So there's no real difference. The only difference is that you've got no choice. It has to be this because currently the rules mean you can't be in a room with other people. So it's one of those things that I think people are going to get better to, and over time, now we've been forced this, it's given the industry, it's given trainers, it's given everyone a kind of a kick up the bum to say, use the technology, use it for what you can, get used to it because this is the way of the future. This helps us get through situations like this. It helps you reach more people. And as that happens, it will get better. It just has to, because if it doesn't, then there will be people that are better at it, and those are the people that will succeed at it.
Yeah. I love that. I think you just, like, for me, made it, like, the way you spoke about it then just made me really understand that, like, as part of, I guess, as a leader, and when we're onboarding people, we're going to have to adapt, aren't we? And I think an example around kids and teachers is a really great way of saying it, because it's not the same as in a classroom. And as much as you can be like, well, we can do it all online, it's really not the same. And that's something I've had quite a few discussions about this week, because I've been asking my clients to take people on remote for years. Take on remote developers. They can work from anywhere. We can hire all over the UK. It's going to be great.
Yep.
Actually, is it really great? I'm finding, as someone who is building a team out remotely, it's not quite as easy as I've been making out for everyone else for such a long time. So it's
it depends on the environment and the company culture and all sorts of other factors to it as to whether it would be a success. The one thing I would say is that the companies that don't embrace this working from home, I don't think they'll do as well, shall we say. I'm being very diplomatic there, which is unusual for me, but I don't think they will do as well as the companies that embrace this fully. And why is quite obvious. It's because if you've got a choice, especially in London, where cost of traveling to the city is about 12 grand plus a year on tube fares. If you've got a choice between working for a company that is around the corner and down in central London, what would you choose 5 years ago? You'd choose the company around the corner. What you do now, where you've got a choice between working remotely for a company or going into the city and paying 12 plus grand a year in tube fares post-tax, because it has to come out your salary after tax, which you're going to choose? 12 grand in my pocket, going to work remote.
And actually, that's a really, really interesting point now, because as a Yorkshire tech scene, we're going to start feeling that, because people are now saying, like, I'm having conversations with people down south who are like, oh, I've had this great idea. I'm going to start using devs in the north because I'll get more bang for my buck. And now we're going to feel that as a tech ecosystem, that we're going to start finding that.
Interestingly, the salaries aren't that different between London and Leeds and Yorkshire, which has always been that, you know, it's the misnomer. And I remember when I moved up here from London, I lived in London 13 years, Portsmouth for 18. They say that I'll be in the Arctic Circle by the time I'm 60. But you know, the whole thing of the difference between London and Leeds and the salary divide, no, there is no real salary divide between up and down. Having the ability to recruit people now from London as well means you get advantage. You've got access to a pool of some very talented individuals. I'm not saying that people up here aren't talented. I'm saying you've also got some very talented individuals down there. And working the banking sector down in London is it can be incredibly stressful. So if people are able to cope with high pressure environments down in London in the banking sector, and you've got access to that pool, then if you've got a high pressure environment up here, you can now recruit remotely down to the place down there where there is a large hub of that kind of able people.
And if you're after specialist skills as well, I think it's opened people's eyes up to going, oh, I needed this person and I could only recruit from my little area because nobody's going to go there. You've now got this wealth of people that you can, in theory, take from anywhere if you want. Although saying that, I still think that there is something about meeting together as people. And I think, you know, this multiple lockdowns has shown that actually we do need that human interaction. It doesn't have to be all the time, and I think that's what will change. I don't see us really going, oh, we'll go back to kind of working from an office 24/7, and I think it's not going to be like that anymore. I think there'll be some days that you say, you know, say we're starting off a project with a client, well, why wouldn't I be on the client site for that initiation of the project? But when we get into the build phase of a project, I don't really need to be with the client 5 days a week, 1-2 days a week, maybe. So I think that's where it will shift, is that there'll be kind of bulks of initiation periods where you go in and do something, and then you take a step back and kind of develop outside. So I still think that there's a place for meeting up with people. Meeting up is just, I don't know. For me, it's so much better than just meeting over Zoom.
Certainly for mental health, we need it.
Yes.
I mean, it's, you know, if you don't see anybody, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know first lockdown got to a point where my missus said to me, "You're going out for a walk." Well, I don't want to go out for a walk. You're going out for a walk, but I don't want to go out for a walk. Get out of the house now. She kicked me out of the house to go for a walk because I hadn't been out for about 3-4 weeks. I was like, oh my, you know, I'm out in the open air. I came back 2 hours later because I was enjoying myself so much out in the open air. That's just getting out. When it comes to meeting people, if you don't meet people anything other than on Zoom, I do feel it can affect mental health. And from that perspective, you want to make sure your people are healthy, they're doing okay. It's very difficult to tell always on this as well, but getting together and seeing people in a room, I think I do feel that helps mental health perspective. Say, okay, I'm meeting people. I'm actually out there. I'm seeing somebody in the flesh. My daughter turned around to someone the other day and we were walking. We went out for a walk and she saw someone we knew go, "Oh my God, a real person that I know." You know, it's a big deal. And I don't think that is going to change. I think that there is that need to meet people. There is that need to be congregating occasionally, even if it's like once a month, once every 3 months for like a quarterly team meet or something. It's still important for the mental health perspective that we all see each other and get together.
Yeah, I think so.
Somebody's just come in on Mirex said the remote work trend started a few years ago, and I think that was true. We started to do a day a week from home, but I don't think anybody ever went, do you know what, this could be full time? And I think suddenly miracles have happened in the places where they went, oh, we can't possibly do this. It's far too complicated. Well, if you don't do it, you've not got business. Oh, look, suddenly we found a way of how to do it. Who'd have thought? I think it's advanced it so much quicker than it would have been if, I think it was headed that way, but I just don't think there would have been the big thing to go. Only the other day I saw like, oh, here's an advert for something where we can work from home 4 days a week. That's now the norm to see that in kind of recruitment adverts, because that is almost like people are going, well, that's what I want after lockdown anyway. So I think there is a definite shift for companies going, that is okay, and that is now the new norm.
Yeah. I think there's a distinction that should be made though between working in lockdown and remote working. And albeit we might be sat at exactly the same desk in front of exactly the same computer, the mental impact of being in lockdown is totally different. And actually remote working, when you've got the option to go into the office once a week, twice a week, once a month, whatever it is, I think a lot of people kind of the two have merged together, and in minds it's like, oh God, I'm stuck in the house, I don't get out. That kind of goes away when lockdown finally gets eased, we hope. That doesn't necessarily mean remote working can't work. I think, so another sort of point was raised in the chat a little while ago about how, and it's something I've thought about and wondered if there's a way we could do it. We've talked about communication, and I think kind of touched on that, water cooler conversation that you get in office you can't recreate in a sort of Zoom chat or Teams chat. Is like, is there a way of virtualizing a space where you can get people together in a virtual room and have that sort of 3D audio, so you can be here and talking to, I could be talking to Mike here, and then I see Leslie kind of virtually over there, and I can walk virtually to there. Initially we just sort of like, why don't we do a retro in Minecraft? Or planning in, or like, I don't know, anything, just something a bit different, just to sort of challenge that kind of Zoom fatigue, kind of covering sway the topics again now. But I think that's, looking forward, that's the sort of stuff we need to start taking more and more seriously, and think about how do we be remote successfully, because we shouldn't try and necessarily fully copy an office environment, because they're two separate different things, and they're not necessarily going to work in the same way. We have to come up with new solutions to working remotely, as in, not how do we work remotely, we're doing that, right? But how do we make it successful? How do we, answer the questions like, I missed that water cooler conversation because I'm missing important information I don't get. It's like, well, yeah, you're missing it, but why? Does that not speak of a larger problem, which is like your communications are not working if you're relying on chance conversations to inform yourself? How do you tackle that? What tools do we need to create within the industry to tackle this? And I think that's kind of, getting my futurist head on now. People who crack that are probably going to be pretty rich. So clearly I haven't cracked it, because otherwise I'd be rich.
I think that's yeah. I think that's really right. And I think, like you say, what we're talking about is the conditions of lockdown as well, like the pressures of that. So I think leading on to that, we've just got a couple of questions left. So if anyone has got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I'm obviously conscious of time. If there was like one word of advice then, or like one tip that you would give other leaders in lockdown, what would that be?
Go on, I'll take this one then. So I think the one bit of advice I'd give to people from during lockdown to take forward is, first of all, it's embrace the technology, embrace what is here, learn from it, take what's been good, what's been bad, learn from it, and use it to your advantage, use it to your best advantage. Whether that's, like I said, about meetings with people abroad, meeting people in the UK. Somebody from sales said to me, they used to travel to a client's site and spend half an hour, and they knew after 5 minutes they weren't going to make a sale. They can now turn around and say after 5 minutes, do you know what, I'm not sure this is right for you. Rather than waste both our time, how about I just give you some of your day back? You've preserved the relationship. They've actually looked in a positive light, because you're now giving them some of the time back, and you haven't wasted any journey time, so you can go on with another meeting instead. So embrace the technology, embrace what is there. Use it to its advantage, but most importantly, can't you start some slack on it? The thing often I've heard various people tell me this before is that they feel that when they're online, they've got to justify themselves being there more. They've always got to be, like you said before, Tim, about being able to answer that I am straight away. You have to be that. No, you don't need to be. I had former employee, I won't say who, but a former employee, it was a UI UX designer, And he said to me he was far more productive at home than he was at work. When I asked him why, he said, because when I'm at home, I'm not stressed about people contacting me because I'll put myself on D&D for the day. He said, but what I do is I'll go and do some work. And if I get stuck, I'll just go do the laundry. I'll go and have a cup of tea. I'll go and watch some TV. He said, and I'll come back. I'm keeping an eye on my hours and make sure I'm doing my hours, but I'll go and get my head away from it so that my subconscious can work on the problem. And then I'll come back and I'll finish it off. And I might work some extra hours just to kind of make up as well. But I'll get the work done. I'll get it done out of the way. And having that gap between meant that he could get on. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do this, that everyone, certainly we've got our working hours, we should be working during our working hours, yes. But if someone is struggling with this, if someone is struggling with doing things on Zoom, give them some support. Have those phone calls where you just pick up the call to them and say, I'm not phoning to talk about work, I'm just phoning to ask you how you're doing, how you getting on, how's life, how's the kids? Because it is more of a solitary existence on Zoom. It is more of a solitary existence when you're on Teams or whatever it might be, where you're on your own at home. The mental health aspect kind of comes back into it there. But that would be my advice. Just embrace it, technology, but cut people some slack as well in terms of the adjustment to this, because it is different and not everyone is able to cope with it the same way.
And also cut yourself some slack as a leader. There's always this pressure that you should be able to hit it perfectly every time and be able to turn up. But it's not always that easy, is it? We're all going through these situations at the moment. Any advice, Tim, Mike?
Yeah, I kind of echoes a bit what Leslie was saying, to be fair. And I'll focus more on people. It's difficult. Lockdown is very difficult, but I mean, going forward as remote working, I think it's embracing flexible working. I suppose that's my point, really. More and more, we're finding that people were initially super stressed, like, I need to go and pick up the kids at 3, and I need to decide, can I go and do this? I was like, you don't need to ask me. Fundamentally, I trust you that you're doing your job, because we have this contract of, this kind of moral contract, almost like, you're doing the job you're paid to do. I don't need to know where you are 24/7. That's just, I think any company that you hear reports of people getting like keyboard loggers and stuff like that, that's dreadful. Just the worst thing. If you need to go and go to the vet to pick up, your cat's ill, go. Don't, all I want to know is, have you told your teammates that you need to pop out for 2 hours? And are they happy with that? I trust you to do the job that you're paid to do. And I think projecting that trust and making sure that's a thing, and constantly just saying, don't worry about it. It's brilliant. Go for it. I know that you're doing the things that you need to do to keep you safe and well. Do that. And I think going forward, especially with more and more remote working, where you can't necessarily see someone and have to just like, how you doing, mate? That is probably one of the biggest takeaways for me that I want to keep doing going forward.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think for me there's two things. One, which is just always be aware of the people that you're working with or looking after, and people. When you see people in an office, you can kind of detect mood changes. It's quite hard when you're on a 5-minute stand up to go, do you know what? This person's not the same as they were last Zoom meeting, because you can keep a happy face for 5 minutes. And companies need to provide that wrapper for people to make sure that they've been looked after. And as leaders, it's really important that we're available for people, which kind of goes against totally what we've been saying about Zoom notifications and stuff like that. But it's really important because people, so I remember we did a survey before Christmas where people were like, 99% of people are, really happy. Did the same survey in January, it went down to about 70%. Wow. Just literally because people are like, oh, it's lockdown again. Yeah. And the curve of unhappiness and it's and being purely company selfish somebody who's not happy ain't going to be as productive as somebody who's happy. Just end of story. And so actually it's as much the company's benefit to go, do you know what, we need to look after these people and make sure they're okay. Even just be there to go, do you know what, if you've got a problem, just ring me up and I'll be, remember the kind of cardboard cutout man that we used to have behind us. So like, if you've got a problem, shove the cardboard cutout man behind you and you talk it through. And sometimes we just have to be that kind of person to go, do you know what, just talk it through with us. Whether that's kind of a personal thing or a kind of work thing, it doesn't really matter. We just need to be there as leaders, I think.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's so tough to tell, isn't it? So we've, I guess, a good question to round things up. I'll check the chat in a minute to see if we've got anything else, but I guess we'll have to be quick on this one. But what one thing do you think will change in software development in the future, and what can we do to prepare for this?
Ooh, wow.
So this is the next bit, the future.
So I think more and more software dev generally will, I think we're going through a cycle, and things always go through cycles, right? But I think more and more, certainly in the cloud, we seem to be more and more about plugging pieces together.
Yeah.
Pre-written, pre-supported tech, and writing the sort of, you know, this infrastructure as code almost, to sort of present, this is how we do stuff in, you know, AWS, which is what we do. We write a lot of Terraform, and actually the writing of the business logic is becoming more and more focused on specific functionality for the business logic, and none of the around, you know, that kind of bootstrappy boilerplate stuff that everyone has to do, but they don't want to do. It's done for you. It's fine. Whether that's a good thing long term or not, I think remains to be seen. Because as soon as you start burying that stuff in, here's a, you know, Lego blocks or whatever to build your thing, great, brilliant. But no one then knows that you shouldn't plug the Duplo into the Lego because it doesn't make sense actually. And when you try and do it, all of a sudden it doesn't work right, but you can't, well, it looks the same. It's kind of got blocks, you can stick it together, and it's kind of, but if you don't understand why, then you start producing stuff that is suboptimal. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that the industry, especially stuff like that we do, you know, mainly AWS cloud dev, is, I think that's the thing that we really need to be kind of aware of and guard against.
So something to watch out for. And I think actually, interestingly, that would be a really good topic for our next sort of get together, something around like the future of that and what we can do to help support the impact that that might have and what that might look like. I think that's a really good point. Anything else to add to that, Les or Mike? Mine's
mainly around cost optimization. So primarily, we all spin up resources in the cloud because you can. It's like, look, it used to take me 6 months to have a new server. Now it's there. It is. But every time that you do that, the AWS money clock goes up and up and up and up. And as a developer, you go, it's just, you know, I've just spun up another MySQL instance. You know, what does it matter? If you spin up a rather large instance, literally, it's like, oh look, there's another £4. There's another £4, and it can eat it up, especially if you're spinning up new environments. And I think, so that's one element of it, is controlling those costs. But also in terms of optimization, there's a real big case for going, well, I can just make the machine bigger, just give it a bit more memory. Oh, it's running fine now. But again, you've just increased your costs rather than looking at what your code is actually doing. So there's definitely a kind of thing to look at that for people, I think, who don't realize potentially once you've entered the cloud realm, it's very easy for money to spin up out of control unless you're very careful.
It's interesting to say about the cost and the optimization, etc., particularly with regards to the maintenance and maintainability, because it's, you know, you've got more power in the box. I think we've talked before about how used to be, you know, when we were younger developers, that the general rule was you have to try and write this as optimized as you can because the system can only cope with so much. You had limited RAM, you had limited power. Time moved forward. What happened? The power of the box became more, so you could do more you could write sloppier code to a degree because you had more power, so you could write it a little bit sloppy. You don't have to worry so much about the maintenance. You could make it more readable. Of course, what happens when Windows goes up, you've got more you can do, but that starts slowing it down. And you get this balance between maintainability and optimization. You can't do both. It's the old adage, you can't do maintainability and optimization. I think moving forwards, I think with the power of the box, it's now got to that point where you can potentially have both. You don't lose so much optimization by writing it a maintainable way. You know, OOP has been around for donkeys, but it's even more important now. You're writing the solid code and using solid principles from a code perspective. There's still going to be this balance between optimization, etc. But as you move forward, there's always been this issue, and I don't think it will go away, where you have a bit of code that starts off at running at 2 milliseconds. You say, oh, well, just going to increase this extra bit of code on there. Now runs at 5 or 10, put a bit more on. The difference each time is small, but you're making small increments in time. Before you know it's a 2-second running bit of code. You add a bit more on 3 seconds, well, it's only a 50% increase. Before you know it, you've got a 10-second piece of running a code that people are asking why it's so slow when it wasn't 2 years ago. These are the sort of things we still have to watch out for. I don't think that changes in that respect. I think we've still got to watch out in code to make sure things are running in a reasonable time. We still have to do the same kind of precautions where we say things like a web page has to load in X seconds, whether it's 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever it might be. We have our standards that we conform to. We still need to have those standards. We still need to conform to those. We still need to not police it, but encourage people to want to do it the right way. I think the difference, I think, moving forward from the development perspective, and it feeds back into this kind of way of working, is that you're going to have more of these kind of streamlined teams where the teams own the product from start through to delivery. And because you've got cloud delivery, you can now do that more readily. You can do continuous deployment more easily. You can do continuous integration more easily. You can do automated testing. So you've got your free extra tester that's testing it through the night for you to test your product, make sure it's all working. As we leverage more of this and we leverage the tech that's there, the tech will move forward, the tech stack will improve. Like I said, we have to watch the costs, but what is the cost of that compared to a developer doing it out of hours? There is still that balance between the two. And over time costs a fair bit of money. Having a developer for free, well, not for free because it's, you're paying for the hardware to run that overnight, is still there, but leverage that as we go forward. I think we'll start seeing more of that, and particularly from the cloud platform, because you can deploy it far more easy. You can deploy it out the door. You can get continuous integration going. The sooner it is in the hands of your customers, the better it is for you and the better it is for the business. So why wouldn't you do continuous integration? And a streamlined team kind of falls into that, where you are deploying stuff out from start to finish, team own it right way through to its deployment, and it's out the door, it's there quick. That I think is the key moving forward from a development perspective, certainly. And from a business perspective, it fits as well, because what does a business want? They want to deploy products to customer. They want to make the money out of it. You want to get it out the door as quickly as you can, but you want quality. You want quality product. So building that into your strategy, building it into your deployment routes, automated testing, etc. We mentioned, I think that will all feed in.
Fantastic, and I think that will definitely lead us on nicely to the next round as well. We did have one question around like mentioning 3D. So we're aware of any 3D tools available for that?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this before. We haven't, because of it's not an area we're internally expert in, I would say. Certainly not in the office, in the virtual office there in Leeds for DAZN. I mean, I do have, I've got a friend who's a lecturer in biochemistry, and he's been using VR to do lectures, I know, remotely. So it is a thing that's out there. Yeah, I guess it feels like it's something that should be able to be done and something that would be useful. I don't know where we would start kind of jumping into that, and how would it work, and what's the kind of like how do we make it work. I don't think we're in a position to buy everyone like Oculus Rift, for example.
Yeah.
Do you think that's maybe almost going back to what we had before, though? It's kind of saying we can't be together, so we're going to find a way to be together in the same room using a virtual lecture hall. which is kind of saying, well, rather than embrace what we've got, rather than embracing a new way of working, we're going to try and go back to the way we were, and we're stuck in that. We want to stay in that.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily means that, though, does it? I mean, it just gives us an extra, well, literally an extra dimension in a virtual sense. Of,
I think so.
I'm not sure. We want to just simulate people sitting in a lecture hall or a classroom. Maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think it's an interesting thing, and I think you can do some interesting stuff with, 3D tech.
It's certainly interesting to see the
sorry, I've just put it into the browser. It looks really interesting, actually. I've never even seen it before.
Which one's that? Is that the Hub.Mozilla?
Hub.mozilla.com.
Yeah, that's come recommended by AK.
Yeah. So it looks like I've never seen it, to be honest. I'd be really interested to try it out, actually, to see what it is. But it seems room interactive-y. But yeah, it looks quite interesting. So
fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
I say it could be quite interesting, though, from the VR section to see He-Man lecturing Godzilla in the middle of a lecture hall. I mean, that would just make my day. It's just
there we go. I think AK's actually set up a room as well, which is incredible. So thank you for that. We'll definitely have a good look into that. So I think, in terms of comments, there's been a few good comments in the background. I think about like the burnout, I think, is a big thing, isn't it? Like you say, around the Zoom fatigue, etc. And then I think making the point, which I think it was I might think it was you that mentioned, Les, earlier, that by the end of the day that you don't even want to do the quality time with your family or people online virtually because you're so tired from it, and that's just such a shame, isn't it? So and I think there's some good advice there around that as leaders as well. You are in lockdown as well, so being able to give yourself that time is and kind of that respect that we are all going through this together is really important. Matt said ditto to good principles as well, so certainly agreeing with everything we said there. So want to say, obviously we've run out of time, we've run over as always, but thank you so much to our incredible speakers for getting involved tonight. Fantastic to hear your stories and so many interesting points, and I think for me, I've certainly kind of going to take away some of the discussion points today and reflect on my approach. So really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And if anyone wants to connect, they're right to just connect on LinkedIn, and people can message you direct if they've got any questions. We do send back a Google survey to everyone that's attended as well, and to be able to give us feedback in order to help shape the future of the events and what that might look like. So if anyone's got any comments or any topics they want to discuss for next time, certainly do please send them on. And thank you so much for people for attending this evening and taking your time out. I know everyone's probably already got Zoom fatigue and then coming on this evening. Maybe next time we should do something where we kind of just literally do an audio webinar, because there's something like Microsoft Teams uses 80% more energy when you've got your video on. So maybe next time let's try and take a bit of a gamble and do a risk where we just do an audio webinar just instead, and I think that would be really interesting.
Well, we know Leslie's wearing trousers.
Oh yeah. Such a good point, Tim. Yeah. Thank you so much for attending anyway, guys, and thanks for getting involved for speaking. It was incredible having you all on, and I really enjoyed tonight. So thank you. It will be, if anyone kind of missed any points or had to dash out the room and come back, we can always you will be sent the YouTube link as well, so people can share that with anyone that weren't able to attend, etc. They can catch up. So thank you very much for everyone attending, and thanks for getting involved with the speakers.